This is part 2 of the TDA instructional prompt for Justice for All. In this video, I'm going to be reading the text with you, and we are going to be looking for three pieces of evidence that we want to include later in our TDA prompt. As a reminder, we are looking for 3 things that Ida B says or does to prove that if you feel strongly enough about something, you should stand up for it. We are connecting the two elements, which is central idea and character's actions. Ida B. Wells was an African American journalist and early leader in the civil rights movement. In this instructional text, Lynn Ramirez discusses an incident in which Ida refuses to give up her seat on a train when asked to move because of the color of her skin. As you read, take notes on how Ida B. reacts to her treatment on the train. One day in May 1884, 21-year-old Ida B. Wells boarded a train for Woodstock, Tennessee, and the school where she taught. Ida sat in the first-class ladies' coach and opened her book. Minutes later, the conductor collected the passengers' tickets. "Can't take your ticket here," the conductor told Ida. "You have to go to another car." In 1884, African Americans, particularly in the South, did not have the same rights as whites. They could not attend the same schools or drink from the same water fountains. African Americans were expected to sit in a separate railroad car, one that was usually dirty and smoke-filled, though they were charged the full fare. I'm going to pause there for a minute to do some thinking aloud. That last sentence really made me kind of angry. It is very unfair for African Americans to be charged the same amount for a ticket, but they're getting a seat that is much poorer, in worse condition than the white people. It said that the separate railroad car was dirty and smoke-filled. If I feel a little bit angry reading this, I would imagine that Ida B. also feels very angry with it happening to her. Having paid for the first-class ticket, Ida B. refused to budge. It was unfair, she thought. "The other car is a smoker," she told the white conductor. "I propose to stay." I like this evidence right here because it tells me what she thinks and it also tells me what she says. So I'm going to use one of my transparency boxes to highlight this evidence that I'll use later. Ida refused to budge. "It's unfair," she thought. "The other car is a smoker," she told the white conductor. "I propose to stay." So because she believes it's unfair, her actions are to tell the conductor that and to stay there. Let's continue reading. When the conductor grabbed Ida's arm to drag her out, she bit his hand. Furious, he disappeared, quickly returning with 2 other railroad men. They yanked Ida from her seat, ripping her sleeve. As they hauled her down the aisle, the white passengers stood and applauded. Rather than riding in the smoking car, Ida got off the train. The railroad had not heard the last of her. She would fight for equal rights, and she would stand up for justice. So that makes me think not only was she physically moved, which is embarrassing and wrong, she basically lost that money because she chose to get off the train and not ride it at all. Ida was born a slave in Holly Springs, Mississippi in 1862, the second year of the Civil War. When the war ended 3 years later, so did slavery. Freedom brought newfound rights and hopes for equality. Education, which had been denied to Ida's parents, was now available to their children. Our job was to go to school and learn all we could, Ida remembered. But in the summer of 1878, life changed for 16-year-old Ida. She was away from home visiting her grandmother. A yellow fever epidemic raged through Holly Springs, killing her mother, father, and infant brother. Oh my, that's awful. As the oldest of 6 children, Ida became the head of her family. In need of work, she passed the teacher's examination and found a job in a one-room schoolhouse, a mule ride away. It was difficult to raise a family and work. When Ida's aunt offered to help out, Ida moved to her aunt's home in Memphis, Tennessee. Ida's new teaching position took her to Woodstock. A train brought her to and from work. So the story's kind of doing a flashback to give us a little bit of background as to how Ida B got on this train in the first place. Ida soon saw efforts all over the South to draw the color line on the railroads. Hopes of equality were fading, and the railroad's attempt to separate African Americans and whites was demonstrated that day in 1884, when Ida was forced out of her seat. Fuming mad, she sued the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. Ooh, I like that evidence. That proves something that Ida did. So I'm going to get another transparency box, and I'm going to drag it down to that evidence that I like on page 4. When the case went to court, the judge decided in Ida's favor. Her ticket, he said, entitled her to a first-class seat, a seat that the smoking car did not provide, and he awarded her $500 in damages. But Ida's victory did not last long. The Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad appealed its case to the Tennessee Supreme Court. When the verdict was reached, the victory went to the railroad. It determined that the smoking car was a first-class coach for colored people, thereby providing separate but equal accommodations. Ida had to return the $500 and pay more than $200 in court costs. That makes me very angry to hear that that case was appealed. Hugely disappointed, Ida wrote in her diary, "I had hoped such great things from my suit. For my people, I have firmly believed all along that the law would be on our side and would give us justice." Ida had lost her battle with the railroad, but her determination to stand up for what was right, After losing her court case, Ida wrote an article about the railroad's suit against her. It appeared in a number of African American magazines, and readers quickly recognized the power of Ida's words. Ida began her new career as a journalist. Her reputation took her to Washington, D.C. in 1913 as a delegate to the National Equal Rights League, a committee formed to address discrimination. The League appealed to President Woodrow Wilson to end segregation. I'm going to use my last text box down here where it said what she does next with her life. She wrote about her suit in the newspaper, and many people were inspired by her words, so she's continuing to stand up for what is right. Ida did not live to see the end of segregation when she died in 1931. African Americans still attend separate schools, drank from separate drinking fountains, and sat in separate sections on buses and trains. Ida's battle for civil rights would now be fought by others. One day in December 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, bringing the civil rights movement to the attention of the nation. In speaking about the courageous woman who went before her, Rosa Parks said, "Ida B. Wells is an inspiration to everyone who knows her. She did not only fight for her rights, but she won. I am sorry I did not know her personally." Ida B. Wells helped lead the way in bringing about justice for all. A journalist and organizer, she helped to create the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, which still fights racial injustice today. When you move to part 3 of the video, we're going to use the text evidence that we found in our passage to write our response. Please view that video next.